Hello, and welcome to Book 5, Chapter 16 of You Should Be Reading. Today, I'd like to talk to you about Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. Now, this is a book that I have seen many, many, many times at my local chapters when I've gone in to look for books and hit the science fiction section, and I've seen it kicking around there. But I've never gotten around to buying it. Even though I picked it up and I've looked at the back, and it's like, oh, it's all about terraforming Mars and these people and blah blah blah. And I knew it was the first book in a trilogy. There's Red Mars, Blue Mars, and Green Mars, I believe. Um, I've known more or less what it is about, and I've always thought to myself, okay, cool. It's a terraforming science fictiony. It's probably going to deal with some nice hard sci-fi in terms of how to terraform a planet and all the varying problems that might pop up because of it. So yeah, I was prepared for that sort of thing when I went into this book, and it took me completely by surprise. There were more than a few differences. Now, I'll say right now, what that little summary I gave of what the book I thought the book was about, hard sci-fi, the difficulty in dealing with another planet, how to terraform it, etc., all that is in here. It's all in here. But what caught me off guard was the fact that this particular book more more aptly delves into the social equation uh, and some of the political equation, and blah, blah, possibly even the spiritual, faith equation of humanity, because this is primarily a book about characters and how they interact, as well as how humanity itself is interacting with itself. The basic premise of the book is that they're going to colonize Mars. Earth is very much kind of going to hell in a handbasket. Overpopulation, not enough resources. Mars is there for the taking. So they end up doing this big expedition uh, for like several years. They had a whole bunch of people in Antarctica cut off from the rest of the world to simulate that experience because they're going to be on their own on Mars. And they managed to choose 100 people. 100 people to make that long journey to Mars to begin the terraforming and whatnot ahead of time before anybody else got there. And this is a story about those first 100, some of them, anyways. You've got John Boone, who was the first man on Mars. He's very famous. Um, Many people didn't think he'd go because he got a whole lot of radiation there in the first place when he went the first time, so they didn't think he'd go again. There is Maya Toitovna, um, who is a lady. She's a Russian lady, very politically savvy, uh, very much in terms of wrangling people to do things. There's Frank Chalmers, who is a friend of John Boone's, who is kind of a manipulator. And Arkady Bogdanov, who's another Russian fellow, very boisterous and happy, full of grand ideas of socialism and whatnot. And there's a few others that are mentioned as well. A few other big main characters that are kicking around in here. And these people are the ones that the story is told through their perspective. And it gets rather interesting because it starts in the future, or rather, maybe the present or the past, because there's more books after this. But it starts at one point when Mars is kind of already colonized, or colonized, colonized. That's not a word. Sorry, I'm tired. I've been working a lot this week, so. But yeah, it's already been colonized, and everybody's happy. There's a celebration going on, and it's told from the perspective of Frank Chalmers at the beginning, while they're already there. And not to spoil anything, because this happens like within the first couple chapters, but through Frank and his manipulations using other people, he manages to get John Boone killed because some rivalry between them. Then the book jumps back to their trip out to Mars and how this rivalry truly began. And it jumps from character to character because it jumps to Maya on that voyage out. It jumps to another character, Nadia, who ends up falling in love with Arcady, uh, telling her part of the story. Jumps to John Boone, uh, jumps back to Frank for a while. Just some seriously interesting stuff, as well as a couple of other characters in here. It jumps between those viewpoints, which is really cool because it gives a more rounded perspective on everybody. But make no mistake, this novel, it's a little bit of a slog, to get through because of it's a very slow burn. Now, I heard and talked with other people who've read the whole trilogy, and they say it's absolutely worth it to stay with it because there's some really good payoff. So I'll be picking up Blue Mars and Green Mars and reading them at some point in the future. And while this one does have some neat little twists, uh, there's not a lot of closure in this. And a lot of the characters in this, as I mentioned, Mr. Frank Chalmers ends up killing one of the guys, John Boone, early on, at least in this, because of some rivalry between them. And that rivalry isn't exactly, put it this way, in those first few chapters, Frank Chalmers comes across as a very arrogant asshole. He's not the sort of character that is very likable. And yet, when it comes back to Frank later on, even though at this point when it comes back to him, John Boone is already dead, still, I found myself feeling sympathy for him with some of the stuff he was going through. Because the story puts you right in the mindset of him and these other characters. So it's easy to empathize and make a connection with them as you're reading it. Amazing, amazing story. From what I understand, Kim Stanley Robinson kind of does this sort of thing where a book will look on the surface to be this thing, like science fiction, and still is science fiction, but it's really a character piece because it's really revolving around the characters. There's some like absolutely horrendous, what's the word I'm looking for here? Payoff, I guess, in the later third of the book when things start kind of going awry up on Mars. Some absolutely horrendous things happen, which made me go, "Oh my God!" So yeah, definitely kind of cool in that regard. So yeah, I don't know. It's up to you whether you think you might like it. So I'm going to leave this episode here. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. And throw a comment in the comments section. Have you read Red Mars? Anything else by Kim Stanley Robinson you think I might like to know about? Throw those comments in the comments section. Let me know. Or if you know of any other books similar to this. I really do like characterization quite a bit. So it was a pleasant surprise to find it in this book, even though I wasn't expecting it going in. So do all that. And until next time, my friends, remember, you should be reading Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. And I'll see you next time.